Hey, you kids, get off my lawn, is something Mr. Reality would say to Gen Zers who walk across his lawn. How are you, Liz?
Oh, this will be exciting. This is fun. I want to find out what this generation are thinking.
Yeah, so this is the Generation Z, and I think that where did it go? They're people born from the mid 1990s to early 2010s. So that little 20-year gap right there, they're the future, right? They're the children are the future.
The children are the future. That's our generation.
Um, so I guess we want to live in a world where we ask the Gen Zers, I wonder if you could grab them as a collective, and some people on your Patreon, if you're not a member, patreon.com/remote giving beyond. It's fun. You can post things to Liz and she'll answer. Can we grab that generation as a whole? I guess we're doing North American only and ask them some questions.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll grab Generation Z as a whole. Now, we've done this before, but now we're a couple of years down the line. It's interesting to see what's going on with this generation. First of all, a lot of them are not buying into the lie of you have to go to university, you have to plunge yourself in student debt, you'll never be able to to pay back the student loan. So they're just not going. So
But how will
that's
they survive if I stop buying expensive coffee? Oh, let's get to the questions. That's not one of them. How do you see your generation any different than the generation of the 60s and 70s, the 1960s, 1970s?
how do you see your generation different than the 1960s? Well, they're saying we're fighters. What do you mean by you're fighters? We're not having the government tell us what to do. Now, see that right there. Even though in the 60s there was a lot of anti-government sentiment, but here we are again, right? Because this generation, they don't want to join the military. Some of them do, but not like how it used to be. They don't want to. They have no interest in becoming a pawn for the government. So let's ask them, why don't you want to join the military? They're very frank. They're like, it sucks. Why does it suck? Because our lives are worth more than that. See, there you go. What else?
Uh, is there an underlying agenda driving the Generation Z's understanding of gender identity?
So, sorry, repeat that question.
My questions coming from the Patreon, they're not mine. Is there an underlying agenda driving Generation Z's understanding of gender identity?
Is there a agenda driving your identity, gender identity? No, we do what we want to do. We refuse to be defined. Mm.
Okay. Uh,
They're very, as I tap into them, they're angry.
why are they angry?
Why are you angry? Because there's nothing going for them.
Does each generation have a collective soul path?
Does each generation have a soul path? Yes. Yes, this generation, it's interesting because this generation is actually going to be quite poor. Now, that frightens me. Obviously, that's a blanket generalization. There will be different people on the different financial spectrums and higher and lower, but collectively, if you move them out to retirement age,
Right.
they're actually going to be quite poor.
Is it because the infrastructure that provides Social Security is no longer there? Or is it they just didn't pay into it?
Ooh, Will Social Security be there? Yes, but how, by what percentage will it be decreased? So say you get the average Social Security check today, which I believe is around 16, maybe $1,700. Uh, what percentage would, to put it in today's terms, so that would be worth like 900 in today's terms. It's not livable. You're not able to live on that. Okay. I mean, maybe you can if you tiny home it and you're growing a garden, blah, blah.
Maybe move to Costa Rica.
Yeah. Or you move somewhere else that doesn't have, the same level of bills that we have here. But let's ask this: is it that a lot of you did not pay into the system? And that's true. A lot of them started their own businesses. They were independent creators. They did not pay into the system like they should. And they're saying to me, we couldn't afford to pay into the system. We barely survived. So going forward, this generation financially, they are going to struggle. This really worries me because I have a Gen Z kid.
So let's talk about artificial intelligence and how the rise of AI will affect Gen Z's career path, because everyone always says AIs are stealing our jobs.
Wow. So how will AI affect Gen Z? They're really going to have to think outside of the box. They're going to have to go back into more hands-on jobs. What about service industry jobs? Service industry jobs, you're going to see this generation, once they start having children, having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to pay the mortgage, just to pay the rent. I feel like their children are going to grow up in, dire financial straits, is what I'm getting. Now, of course, again, let's just make this very clear before you all start putting your hate comments on the video. This is a blanket generalization. There will be people that are going to be above this financially, but this is alarming to those of us with Gen Z kids. I
How
mean,
about
it
healthcare
really is
and
shocking.
medical trends of that generation? Seems like they also fall into a lot of TikTok health trends, and I wonder what overall help or hindrance that will have for them.
It's very helpful. I'm getting, it's exceptionally helpful. So again, they're going to look for, sort of self-diagnosis. What about the health trends that are going on in this generation? Will this generation be able to have a cure for cancer? Will they still have cancer? They will, and they will have it at an alarming rate. I feel like, okay, so is it Generation Alpha that finds a cure for cancer? No, it's going to be another generation behind Generation Alpha. That's quite sad because as I'm looking out, it looks like it gets to a point where everybody, or a majority of people, a couple of generations from now, will have to, suffer with that. Lots of degenerative diseases as well. We are going to do an in-depth probe on sugar, and we're going to find out the
Sugar
links. Yeah, yeah,
makes me
we're gonna.
grab
So
sugar.
that's gonna be behind the paywall though, because that's gonna be such an important probe. So yeah, whether sugar is responsible for a lot of this stuff. So it looks like Gen Z are really going to suffer, guys. It doesn't look good.
What ethical considerations drive Brand Z?
What ethical considerations? Clean water is one. Environment. Are you will? But they're not willing to do it. Are you willing to pay money to do this? No. So again, this generation are very different because they've grown up with the internet. They're growing up with access to a lot of free information that comes quickly. And just like you said with TikTok, they're not willing to spend money. They don't. Do you have money to spend? They don't really have money to spend. what percentage of this generation will eventually be homeowners? So only about 50% of this generation will be homeowners. Now that's alarming.
That is alarming. It's a lot less than it probably should be in that era. I would say for them, what motivates them and what do they look for to shape their opinions? Do they believe anything that what makes, I don't know, do they, how much do they question the true narrative that's out there?
That's a good question. What motivates you to formulate opinions? Really, right now, as I'm tapping into them, trends. Obviously they're very young. They're
They're
still into
manipulated.
trends. How do you research information? Well, are you willing to look at lots of different sources? Yes, they look everywhere and they'll take every opinion into consideration, no matter how bizarre it is. If there's a platform and the opinion is out there, and what about the scientific fact and basis behind it? They really don't care about that so much. They like it's a seeing is believing type of generation. So if you're going to put out a theory, they want to see it. They want to see it in action. They want to see results. So it's a very visual generation.
I wanted to talk about mental illness generally for them. Is what percentage is affected, in their mid 30s by mental illness?
Affected by mental illness in their mid 30s. This is high. Again, this is not looking good for Gen Z. It's about 60%, 60 to 70 is what I'm getting.
And what are those conditions?
And what are those conditions? Lots of addictions, lots of depression, anxiety, agoraphobia is another one. Is this generation sort of agoraphobic or isolated because they don't really have to go into the workplace? That's correct. So that, this work from home culture that we all enjoy, right? Because we've done our time in the workplace. We've been there, done that. But for this new generation coming in, they won't know what that's like to have friendships really in the workplace. They're gonna feel very isolated. They're not getting that connection that humans need in order to thrive.
Here's a question from Patreon. It says, I read an article that said those born in the 1990s were coming into an incarnation to break down current society constructs, and those born after 2000 are the ones who build a new type of society that's more aligned with the age of Aquarius. Is this true?
No, they are breaking down. Not so much the 90s, right? They're still sort of hanging on to Generation X. When you're getting into the 2000s, now they're the ones that are really breaking down the social construct. So the early 2000s going into 2010, sort of that range, they're the ones that seem to be bucking the trend. They've had a lot of things to contend with, obviously, with the C word, with inflation, with now computers are taking over jobs. You've got an otherwise retiring population that would normally bow out of the workplace. They're staying on to work longer. Not that these kids want to do that job, right? I look, don't get me wrong. It's not that
Don't
these
shoot the
kids,
messenger.
no, these kids don't want to go bag groceries. They're not those type of kids. If you're not paying them a decent amount of money, they're not even going to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah,
They're
they
not.
want $50 to bag groceries and they don't understand how the economy works. So let's ask this. What aspirations does Gen Z have for their future?
What aspirations do you have for your future? It's really about the path of least resistance. So they're going to do the minimum in order to earn money and to survive. Wow. Good grief. Um,
And how will that work out for them?
it's not going to. As we see that when they get to retirement age, they're actually going to be on the breadline, this generation. I'm not talking about your high flyers, doctors. Well, lawyers is kind of becoming a saturated profession. It used to be, a specialty. Now everybody's going to law school, it seems. Not those sort of essential people, but certainly those that were admin. Let's ask about their parenting skills. Okay, so as a whole, what about your parenting skills? Do you find that Generation Z is going to be like helicopter? No, not at all. So that was an interesting question for me because obviously we track them, we trace them, we have them on camera, we can see what speed they're doing going down the road, we know where they're going at all times. They're going to take a little more hands-off approach and allow their children to have a little bit more freedom. Are you going to allow them to play outside? Will you encourage that? Yes, they will. So maybe we'll see a resurgence of kids playing outside. Like, it's so weird to me. My kids are like the only ones that play outside. Nobody plays outside anymore. So out of the Gen Z, will we see people playing outside? You will. So it looks like they're going to try to go back into nature. They also are you interested in living in big cities? Not really. Not really. They would rather live in smaller areas, cheaper areas. Do you have problem living in tiny homes? I mean, if they can avoid living in tiny homes, what's so interesting about Gen Z is you're starting to see a lot of van life people. And if you go onto like YouTube or TikTok, or you have this generation of 20 somethings, maybe even going into their 30s, that are choosing van life. So they're still working, they're still making a lot of money, but they're living out of their vans. They refuse to pay these exorbitant rents, these crazy bills. They're working remotely and they're traveling around. But most of all, they're just saving all their money. This is what they have to do in order to buy a house and be comfortable. That's where we've gotten them. It's quite terrible, actually, when you think about it.
It's not great. Thanks for your questions, everybody. Thanks, Gen Z. Good luck.
They just flipped me off. All right, we'll stop this one here. They just flipped us off, Ronan.